My name is Father Bernie O'Connor. I'm the president here at DeSales, and I've been asked to welcome you all. We're very happy to have you here. DeSales is the youngster in the group of Helvaic colleges and universities. Next year we celebrate our 50th year of being here in the Lehigh Valley, and we're very excited about that. In honor of that, we've been able to purchase 550 acres of beautiful land all around here over the years. We use about 250 of them, but if you stand out here in front of the building, everything that you can see is owned by DeSales University, which we think is kind of neat because this is a nice place to live, nice place to be. We have a number of major programs, as you all know. If you're in the buildings to the, whatever that is, over there, we have all of our athletic fields, and they're going to be significantly improved beginning in April of this year. They're the least attended to area of the campus. If you go over in this direction, you'll find the buildings that are related to healthcare and the natural sciences. If you go that way, Dueling Hall has most of the social sciences and the liberal arts. If you continue going that way, up at the top of the hill is the Labuda Center for the Performing Arts. That's where we have our television, film, dance, theater. I think that's it. All of our performing arts, so they're all located up there. And in the summertime, that's where the Shakespeare Festival hangs out. And so they move in actually the day that exams end. All the students have to leave, and the Pennsylvania Shakespeare people start pouring in. And then they run until the end of, sort of the middle of August before the other people return. And in the other direction, or that way, we have the residence halls. We have rooms for about 1,200 students who can live on the campus with various types of accommodations. The newest ones are private little apartments that have 5 people in each apartment with little kitchenettes so they can prepare cooking. First year we opened it this past year, they set off the fire alarms almost every day. So we had to have a couple courses on how to toast bread. And the wise people who designed these buildings realized that that was a real possibility. So the sprinkling system is actually connected to heat as opposed to smoke. So the alarms will go off with the smoke, but not the water. It drenched the whole building. We have about 1,200 students that live on the campus. We have 1,600 in the undergraduate day program. Then we have a very successful and prosperous access program, which is for working adults who did not finish college right after high school. They drive in here in the evening. They're mostly working all over the place. There are about 1,000 of them. So at 5:30, all of the students are down at the gym playing, and all of the adults are driving in to continue with their day of going to class. And then we have 8 graduate programs. We've been very fortunate to develop those. We started early on with nursing because when I first came in '74, I was asked to go to Sacred Heart Hospital to teach intro to philosophy class. And that was because we had started to offer courses that made it easier for the nurses to get their BSNs, and we've been working on that regularly. But that was the first area that we did master's degree for the nurses. And now we have a doctorate in nursing practice, which is quite popular. And the other doctoral program we just started last year, it's in physical therapy. So we have 1 year of those students here, which is a bit of a problem because it's a 7-year program. So we've got to find a place for another 300 students. So we're going to take up a collection. No, I'm just kidding. But we're glad you're all here. We hope you have a wonderful day today. It looks like it's going to be marvelous weather-wise. The rains are holding off. We know many of you come here quite frequently. This building was built primarily for our own students in terms of programming, but also for the larger metropolitan area and the southern part of the Lehigh Valley. And it's used, as you probably know, a lot. It's very popular. It's easy to get here, easy to get out of here. Food's good. Students are pleasant when you see them. Have a great day. Enjoy yourselves, and thanks for being here today.
Good morning. I'm Diane Dimitroff, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lehigh Valley Association of Independent Colleges, and thank you all for being here today. We are just delighted to see so many people out, especially early on a Friday morning. Thank you to Father O'Connor, who in addition to being the president of DeSales University is the chair of the board of the Lehigh Valley Association of Independent Colleges, or LVAIC. LVAIC is a consortium of the 6 private colleges in the Lehigh Valley, and we come together to collaborate in areas that expand opportunities for faculty, staff, and students, and provide opportunities for cost effectiveness and operating efficiencies across our group through collaboration. One of the examples of our collaboration, of course, is faculty collaboration. And so we're really delighted to have all of you here today to showcase the work of our faculty with the release of the 7th annual State of the Lehigh Valley event prepared for us by the faculty group called the Lehigh Valley Research Consortium. So we are just delighted to be able to showcase their work today. Our event today would not be possible without the support of course, our member institutions. Our 6 primary institutions are, of course, DeSales University, Cedar Crest College, Moravian College, Muhlenberg College, Lafayette College, and Lehigh University. We are very, very grateful to the people who sponsored the event today, so all of our sponsors, and I would like to just take a moment to recognize who those folks are today. Our presenting sponsor today is Highmark. Our partner sponsors today are Just Born Quality Confections, the Lehigh Valley Workforce Investment Board, National Penn Investment Trust Company, and PPL Corporation. Our breakfast sponsor today is City Center Lehigh Valley, and our community sponsors today are Barry Isett and Associates, Capital Blue Cross, Crayola, Lehigh Valley Community Foundation, Social Science Research Center, Southside Initiative, and St. Luke's University Health Network. And our printing sponsor today is EBC. Please join me in a round of applause to thank our sponsors. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jane Brooks from Highmark to say a few words. Oops, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. I know you're all very anxious to hear the highlights of the report this morning, so I'm not going to take a lot of time. I just wanted to echo Diane and Father Bernie's comments about welcoming you here for the annual State of the Lehigh Valley Address. We're proud to be a sponsor again this year. And I just hope that you all understand Highmark's commitment to the Lehigh Valley community. We're proud to be here, we're proud to work, and to serve many of you here as customers of ours. So thank you for being here. On behalf of Highmark and all of its employees, we're really privileged to be a part of this program for a number of years. And we're grateful to LVAIC and to the Lehigh Valley Research Consortium for planning, organizing, and of course, producing or publishing the report. It's certainly quite a labor-intensive initiative and one that's certainly well worth it. So thanks to all of them, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Hannah Stewart Gambino. I've served this year as the director of the Lehigh Valley Research Consortium, and I'm also a professor of international affairs and government at law at Lafayette College. I used to be at Lehigh, and my husband's at Muhlenberg, so I just get confused about where I am all the time. Sorry. Before introducing the editors of this year's report, who'll do the bulk of the talking about this 2015 State of the Lehigh Valley report, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate the founder of the LVRC. Michelle Deegan, will you please stand? I'm going to talk about you. So I'm sure that almost everybody in this room knows that the LVRC simply would not exist if it were not for Michelle Deegan and her extraordinary vision, passion, and commitment to the Lehigh Valley. As a region and as her friends and associates, we're so fortunate that Michelle and her husband Bill decided to return to their hometown in the Lehigh Valley to pursue their careers and to raise their family. As a political scientist and as a researcher, Michelle's vision has always been that good public policy, organizational decision-making, and democratic practice must be rooted in reliable, nonpartisan, available, consistent information. In 2007, Michelle almost single-handedly created the Lehigh Valley Research Consortium to bring our academic communities represented in Levaic into partnership with their host communities, specifically through our research capacity. Michelle has stepped down out of the director position this year, but she's as committed, engaged, and active in the region as ever. We all owe her an enormous debt of gratitude. Please join me in a round of applause for Michelle, who honestly, if there were such a thing as the Most Valuable Faculty Community Member Award, Michelle would surely win it. Thank you, Michelle. Before returning to this year's report, I'd also like to say a word about the faculty who participate in the LVRC. Each faculty member has his or her own day job on one of the Levaic campuses. Their work for the LVRC is almost always above and beyond their home campus responsibilities. So why do we do this? We're your neighbors. Like you, we're community members. Our kids are friends with your kids. We shovel each other's sidewalks. We're in school and issue-based and neighborhood organizations with you. We root for the Iron Pigs or for the Phantoms or for our local heroes right along with you. We're proud of our region, and we care about bringing our skill sets to the table in partnership with all the others toward our collective aspirations for health and well-being in the region. So this annual event represents not just the benefits of Levaic institutions in the region, but perhaps more importantly, the commitment of our Levaic faculty and students to this region. It matters to us, and we thank you for being here with us today. So now let me acknowledge and recognize this year's editors, Professor Lenethia Matthews-Schultz, Associate Professor of Political Science from Muhlenberg, and Dr. Christine Carpino, also a political scientist, teaching at Cedar Crest, who are this year's editors. The work involved in editing this kind of publication is almost beyond description. I hope you agree. It's a wonderful publication. And I'd like for you to join me in thanking Lenethia and Christine for their enormous efforts, professionalism, and really awe-inspiring attention to detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, and good morning. I'm Lenethia Matthews-Schultz. You'll have an opportunity to hear from my co-editor, Christine Carpino, at the end of the program this morning. I've been a contributor to the State of the Lehigh Valley Report for several years, but this is the first time I've really had the opportunity to serve in the capacity of the editor of the report. And the individuals who contributed to this report made my work and Christine's work pretty easy, actually, and very rewarding. As Hannah suggested, the State of the Lehigh Valley Report is a genuinely collaborative enterprise. You'll notice that the contributing authors include individuals from all of our region's universities and colleges with wide-ranging experience, ranging from sociology to business to math. And in academic institutions that are most often characterized by disciplinary seclusion, this kind of collaboration is really rare, and it's worth celebrating. The State of the Lehigh Valley Report is also a labor of love, whose authors typically downplay their contributions to its production, its quality, and its value to our region. And I don't want to let them get away with that. So I'd like to just quickly read their names and ask them to stand so that they can be recognized for their incredible work on behalf of the Lehigh Valley community. I'm not sure that they're all here, but I will read all of their names. Brian Allnut, Assistant Professor of History at Northampton Community College. Chris Borick, Professor of Political Science and Director of the Muhlenberg Institute of Public Opinion. Bob Brill, Associate Professor of Psychology at Moravian. Michelle, we all know Michelle. Scott Hoke, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice at Cedar Crest College. Rosemary Lister, who's an adjunct faculty at Northampton Community College and also is a community health consultant with St. Luke's. Sue McGorry, Professor and Chair of Business Administration here at DeSales. She's way in the back. Karen Beck-Pooley, adjunct at Lehigh University and a senior associate at CZB, which is not easy to say. Rajika Reed, adjunct faculty and graduate student at Lehigh University and an epidemiologist at St. Luke's. Rob Root, professor of math at Lafayette. Sabrina Teresi, assistant professor of economics and business at Moravian. And Deb Wetcher-Hendricks, associate professor of sociology also at Moravian. Thank you guys for all of your hard work. This year, the LVRC Executive Board decided to focus our report on inequalities and disparities in the Lehigh Valley. And this theme is woven throughout the report. And our reasons for selecting this focus were many, but I'll highlight just two of them for you briefly this morning. First, I think that there was interest among many of us in considering the regional effects and implications of national trends, perhaps even global trends, in widening income and wealth inequality. So national data suggests, for example, that wealth inequality is at its greatest point since the Great Depression, despite recent positive economic growth and some gains in employment. Concern about the growing effects of economic inequality are increasingly echoed at the highest levels of political debate. Social mobility, for example, was a core of the President's State of the Union address just this past January. So in considering widening economic inequality, the authors of the report think about this regionally in two ways. First, we compare the Lehigh Valley to similarly situated, similarly populated regions in the Northeast. And second, we also consider inequalities within our own region of the Lehigh Valley. In addition to thinking about how national trends are playing out locally, I think a second motivation was that we were interested in kind of broadening the discussion about inequalities to consider things such as opportunities for advancement, protection from declining wages, political disenfranchisement, access to health care, to health and well-being, and varied enjoyment of the benefits of urban and economic development. So if you scan our table of contents and the report itself, those of you who are familiar with the State of the Lehigh Valley report from past years will recognize several familiar community indicators that we continue to look at over time, such as the diversification of our population, changes in income and employment over time. But you'll also notice some new indicators, and I think those are the result of our thinking about the multifaceted nature of inequality in our region. So time does not afford a full discussion of the entire report this morning, and unfortunately this presentation doesn't include time for questions, but we will have time after the break for more sustained conversation in breakout groups. And I know that I speak on behalf of all of the authors of the report in welcoming you to contact us with your questions. All of our email addresses are included in the back, and researchers love it when someone shows interest in what they have done. So please email us with questions about our research. I'd like to get the ball rolling this morning by talking briefly about the changing terrain of households and families in the Lehigh Valley. And so if you start by looking at figure 2, which is on page 3, this provides a snapshot of the composition of Lehigh Valley households using 5-year estimates from the American Community Survey. A majority of our households in the region are comprised of married households without children, and more than a quarter of households in both the state and in our region are households in which individuals live alone. So just to kind of take the case of Lehigh County, you can see that under 20% of households in Lehigh County are married households with children. About 30% are married households without children. Close to 18% are categorized as other households, and those would include single-parent families and also individuals who live with family members who are not spouses or children. And almost 27% are households where individuals live alone, and about just under 6 are what are characterized as non-family households. So those would be people who are living together, but they aren't related in some way. And this data is consistent with what we know about national trends. The census data suggests that across the nation, the number of married households without children now exceeds those with children. And that's a real dramatic reversal in just a few decades. And the numbers of one-person households also continue to increase across the nation. How we count and define and measure and track families over time and households over time is an area of really rapid change. For example, in 2000, the census began recording same-sex partners who lived together. At that time, no state permitted same-sex marriage, so all of those individuals were counted as unmarried couples. But then in 2010, the census started collecting and tracking individuals who identified as same-sex married couples. And thanks to the hard work and the careful data gathering of Jeffrey Funk, who is a student at Muhlenberg College that I've had the good fortune to work with, he's in the back this morning, we were able to include some of this data in the report. And Jeff found that current estimates in the Lehigh Valley suggest that there are about 1,160 same-sex couples, married couples in the Lehigh Valley, and between 15 and 19% of them are also raising children. In addition to considering the composition of households, which includes everyone who lives together in a household, we also wanted to look at the composition of families. Families are a subset of households that include people who are related to each other through marriage or through birth or adoption. And we really wanted to get a sense of how families are faring in the Lehigh Valley. And so first, to consider the good news is that the vast majority of families in the Lehigh Valley are living above the poverty level, as you see in Figure 3. The flip side, of course, is that 9% of Lehigh Valley families are living in poverty, and that equates about 15,000 families. Moreover, the poverty level is a conservative estimate, or maybe it's a low floor. So the poverty level in 2013 for a family of 4 was equal to about $23,500. So it's a pretty conservative estimate. To get a better picture of what those families look like, those families that are living in poverty in the Lehigh Valley, Figure 4 shows that a vast majority of the families who are living in poverty are families headed by single parents, 69% in Figure 4. Finally, Figure 5 shows that the majority of single-parent families living in poverty, a whopping 84% of them, are headed by single mothers. And so these data are really significant to the extent that family structure is linked not just to economic well-being, but to social mobility, particularly for children living in single-parent families. A recent study from Harvard actually suggested that at the level of community, this makes a big difference, and that is that the number of single-parent families and the number of two-parent families has a big impact on an individual child's chances of moving out of poverty later in life. Additionally, recognizing that the vast majority of families living in poverty in the Lehigh Valley are headed by single mothers takes on additional meaning alongside our knowledge that women on average make less than men. They have less access to comprehensive health care, struggle to afford quality childcare and early childhood education. And those are variables that you will see later in the report. So in this way, the composition of families is intimately related to multiple indicators of inequality and disparity. So with that, a very brief introduction to the report as a whole and a quick look at Lehigh Valley families, I'm going to invite my colleague and dear friend, Chris Borick, to share some further context for us to get started thinking about these questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, first of all, to all the folks that have done so much work to put today's event on. Thanks for having us on DeSales campus, Father O'Connor. Thanks to Diane and Hannah and LVRC, and of course, LVAC for organizing events like this, and the sponsors. And of course, I'll just reiterate the wonderful work that Christine and Lenithia did. You could imagine working with faculty, right? Well, at least this faculty, and trying to keep us on task and to do it in a very broad and impressive way. And I was delighted to have the chance to work with them and to focus on some of the topics that Lenithia was talking about today, the disparities, those issues that are in many ways defining a lot of contemporary American politics and our discussions on urban areas and across the country. And so it was great to be able to spend some time to think about that in a little more comprehensive and integrated way. And so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about public attitudes and public perceptions dealing with socioeconomic disparities that we'll see. So in the section that I wrote, we examine public attitudes, people in the Lehigh Valley and how they view life here, and do that through a structure where we might compare different groups of socioeconomic differences. In other words, in terms of both economy and race in particular in this. The results that I'm going to share with you are part of the quality of life study that we do with the Morning Call every year. Since 2003, we've surveyed individuals in the Lehigh Valley to ask them a variety of questions about quality of life here. We're currently doing that again for the spring of 2014. We'll be releasing in a few months. So it's a comprehensive study that looks at all different aspects of life. And it gives us a really good chance to see what people think about the area that we live in, the quality of life in the place we call home. A little a little methodological. It's 403 adults, residents of the Lehigh Valley. We contact on both cell phones and landlines. We did this one last year between February and early March, and the margin of error is 6%. So, with a little background in mind, we'll start with the first slide. And this is a rating of quality in life in the Lehigh Valley by income strata. Right? Often we think our view of the world is defined by our economic standing and what we might have in terms of our resources and ability. And I think if you look at this chart, you can see some interesting things right off the start. When you look at the ratings of overall quality of life, there's a clear relationship to income and how people have in terms of their resources as families in the Lehigh Valley. If you make over $80,000 as a family, 45% of those families say life here is excellent. If you go down to lower income categories, you could see that's cut in half. And if you get into the lowest strata, and again, these are pretty broad categories because of sample size, for those with under $40,000 in income, only 22% say excellent, 11% say poor. You could see literally in our 80,000 and above categories, we didn't have one individual that said quality of life here was poor. So as often as dictated, our views on the world are associated with our economic standing, and that's very true in the Lehigh Valley. Another break that we can give looks at race and how race might have an impact on our views of living in Lehigh and Northampton counties. And as you could see fairly clearly, there's a distinct difference among individuals of different racial background and how they view quality of life here. While white residents of the area, 35% say it's excellent, half of that, less than half, of minority. And we collapse all non-white individuals into one category, again, because of sample size. I apologize for blurring out some of the details that might be in there. But you can see in general that trend, right? That race has a big effect on how you might view your life in this part of the state and in the Commonwealth. And it's an important distinction that we see. 3 times as many, it's 14% minority, think it's poor quality of life in the valley compared to 4% of whites. So you can see those differences are fairly stark. Here's an interesting, it's a little bit of a busy chart, but I'll try to take us through it and look at some of the relationships. This is satisfaction. So if you look at satisfaction with your family income, how satisfied you are. Do you think you have you're very satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or very satisfied with how much income you take in on a basis and how that affects your quality of life? And I think you could see that relationship, again, pops pretty clearly. For individuals that say, you know what, I'm pretty satisfied overall with how much income my family has, you see generally positive views on the quality of life in the Lehigh Valley. 40% say excellent, 60% say good. Again, nobody says fair or poor if you are in those upper income categories. However, if we look at or in the most satisfied income categories, you go down to those that are dissatisfied with their income, that are having struggles most likely, you can see those numbers drop dramatically, with about 1 in 5 individuals in the area that are dissatisfied with their income saying it's a poor quality of life in the valley. Again, those relationships, I think, are stark. And we think about a unified valley, right, of individuals living and sharing a lot, but our views on how we live in the same place could be very distinct based on these qualities. Couple of more slides. This is kind of turning it around. How satisfied are you with your income based on your racial standing? And as you could see, again, those distinctions across racial divides are very stark in the valley. While 45% of white residents of the valley say they're very satisfied, only 38% of minority do. Where you see the big drop is in that somewhat or very dissatisfied categories, with individuals of minority racial backgrounds almost 3 times as likely to say they're very dissatisfied with their income in comparison with white individuals. Again, the distinctions pop slide after slide. I think it's the last slide that I'm going to look at is looking ahead. So every year we ask individuals a variety of concerns. What are they concerned about? Are they concerned about air quality, water quality, being a victim of crime? One other thing that we ask is, are they concerned about becoming unemployed? You know, your confidence in your employment status. And this one tells me a little bit about, or tells, I think, a story of economic uncertainty and how it might affect, be based on your your income categories. For our lowest income Lehigh Valley residents, you see a greater level of concern than you would among those over 80,000. So if you have an income over 80,000, family income, 3/4 say they're not at all concerned with becoming unemployed. That's cut by about 20% among those under 40,000, where only 54% say they're unconcerned. And you could see the increase about just under 3 out of 10 people with under $40,000 in income are either very or somewhat concerned, compared to only 8% in those high income categories. I do have one more slide, and I just do the same thing by race. And I think this is, again, fairly striking, right? If you are white, only 14% of individuals that are white in the Lehigh Valley say they're very or somewhat concerned about becoming unemployed, compared to almost half of minority residents of Lehigh and Northampton counties. So those distinctions are fairly stark. And again, we think of ourselves as a unified area. And overall, I'll just make one quick last point. In general, residents of the Lehigh Valley like where we live. They view it positively. They have consistently over the course of the time that we follow this and study this. But in many ways, we're a divided community. We're a divided community in how we look at life in this region. While we think of it positively, there are stark and fairly important distinctions that I think set us up very nicely for some of the other points and parts of this really in-depth report. And that's a good time for me to break and introduce Sabrina Teresi from Moravian College, who takes a look at education. And underlying a lot of the issues that I just talked about are educational disparities and educational issues. And she does a wonderful job of talking about that in the report. And I'd like to introduce her to come up and speak. Thanks.
All right, good morning, everyone. Can we hear me? Last year I didn't put this down. I don't know why. All right. So again, I'm Sabrina Teresi from Moravian College. I'm an assistant professor in economics. So let me switch this slide. So what I want to talk about today is mostly income disparity and potentially where that might come from. So we've heard about different family structures this morning. If you read the full report, or when you read the full report, you'll also note unemployments, variations in job type, unionization rate, and demographic characteristics can affect income. So I'm going to focus today on the educational component of income, how we attain education and the opportunity to attain education, and how that varies by gender and race. All right, so if you look at page 16 of your book, we have this table that tells us what we would expect, right? So poverty is related to our education level. As we achieve higher levels of education, we have a lower existence of poverty. And this is true across the country, as it is true in Lehigh and Northampton County. But what we also note here is distinctly increased levels of poverty, even within educational category in Lehigh County as compared to Northampton County. Right. Now, what's interesting to take this a step further is to look within income categories, right? Within educational categories and see how income changes. Unfortunately, this level of detail is not available at the race and ethnicity distinction, but it is available for different genders. So what we'll note is the distinction between income by gender. These trends are consistent in the Lehigh Valley as they are at the national level. So as we've heard today, and as you can read through the report, some potential causes of this could be family structure, child care or elder care responsibilities, and again, job type or employment sector. So we'll first take a look at Northampton County. So this is on page 16 of your text. So what we note here is distinct differences in income for similarly educated males and females within Northampton County. So I've done the math for you. The largest gap occurs in the less than high school educated population, and women earn 57 cents for each dollar that their male peers earn within this education level. And then the smallest gap actually occurs at the associate degree level, where women earn 74 cents for each dollar that their male peers earn. If we look towards Lehigh County, we find that this gap increases, where females earn between 44 cents and 82 cents of what their male peers earn. And again, this is within the same level of education. So even at the highest education level, where we consider graduate or professional degrees, women earn only 60 cents on the dollar for their male peers. So I was recently at an economics conference a few weeks ago, and this data keeps coming in that this is not a skills gap, right? So the reason for the income disparity, as we see here, is not education, it's not skills. What is it? And we can have some of those conversations, hopefully, in our breakout session later today. Right. So despite the discouraging evidence of the gender wage gap within educational categories, we do know that educational opportunity can lead to lower levels of poverty. So what we're going to take a look at here is the opportunity to become educated and how that varies by gender and by race. So at the national level, we have 42% of 18 to 24-year-olds enrolled in higher education. And the majority of these are females, right? 47% to 38% male. The highest educational attainment, however, for our population at the national level receiving college education is only around 1/3 of our population, right? A little less than 1/3. So we're going to consider the Elvaic institutions and how our Elvaic institutions either mirror or are distinct from the national trends in terms of enrollment and graduation rates by gender and ethnicity. And I will note here that we have subsets of the Elvaic populations here to report, again, based on data availability. So unfortunately, the IPEDS database, where most of this data came from, Muhlenberg had not reported that data for the year we had, so we don't have Muhlenberg. And of course, when we go by gender, we don't include Cedar Crest as a female college. And for graduation rates, we consider only 4-year graduation rates. So the Northampton County College and Lehigh Carbon Community College are not included in those. All right, so let's take a look at undergraduate enrollment by gender. So the Lehigh Valley institutions mirror the national trends, except for Lehigh and Lafayette College. We have more, the majority of females enrolled in our institutions in the Valley. And graduation rates by gender, we see either equal or better graduation rates among the female members of the colleges than the male members of the college. Right? So we'll change our discussion now to racial disparities. And unfortunately, at the national level, I can't do that same comparison that I could do within educational category by race, which I really wanted to do, but that data is not available. So we look here with just the educational attainment by race for the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton metropolitan statistical area. So again, I did the math for you. So you'll note that 13% of the Hispanic population is college educated or above. 18% of the Black or African American population has achieved college education, and 27% of the white population has. So with the national average of 29%, we see much lower averages of Hispanic and Black or African American individuals receiving college education. And we see that that mirrors our enrollments in the LVAIC schools. So the dark blue or the purple is our white enrollment percentage in our area colleges. So we see that this represents between 64 and 83% of the enrolled students in all of our LVAIC institutions. Now, if we look at graduation rates by race and ethnicity, though, we see distinctions across, but we don't see evidence of clear trends, which is a good thing, right? So depending on which college, we have a variety of race or ethnicity being the most likely to graduate or the least likely to graduate. It's not clear in any case that one race or ethnicity is worse off than the others across our area schools. So just for further discussion as we move into our breakout sessions later today, it might be interesting to note these kind of two summary points. That we have increased enrollment rates among women. We have increased graduation rates among female students. However, we have lower median income levels even within those same educational attainment categories. So the question here is, how can we have females the opportunity to have access to higher paying jobs? We also see lower educational attainment among Black and Hispanic individuals. This leads to lower potential incomes, and so the question here is, how do we access more educational opportunities for this subpopulation? And further, the wage disparity is of particular significance if we think back to what Lenithia said earlier today, when we think about the single parent households that are in poverty that are majority female led. Right? So even if these females have similar incomes to their male counterparts, they have less ability to provide for their family because they have access to lower paying jobs. Right? So just some thoughts for consideration before we move on to our breakout session. Now I would like to turn the presentation over to my colleague Rob Root from Lafayette College.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, it's the math prof. And he wants to talk about test scores. It's okay. It's not that bad. So I do want to talk to you about test scores. We're going to look at the scores on the PSSA. I want to start right off by acknowledging that standardized test scores are far from the be-all and end-all in assessing the quality of an education that we deliver. And yet, when we look at them carefully, even the crude data that anybody can get from the Pennsylvania Department of Education offers us some concrete suggestions for how to address the problem of economic inequality in our public schools. So, no surprise, poverty is associated with lower test scores. Who knew? This is true in the Lehigh Valley. It's true everywhere in the country. It's true across the world. The association between poverty and low scores increases as students move through school. We can see this in this data, and again, this isn't unusual data. It's not unique to the Lehigh Valley, but it is the way it is. It's the difference in the progression that we see between reading and math scores that suggests that there might be different ways to address the problem. So, you knew it was coming. I've got this lovely plot, and on this plot, I've got a bunch of points. Each point represents one grade at one school, in this case an elementary school, here in the Lehigh Valley. That means either Northampton or Lehigh County. Okay? That's where these schools all live. And so what's going on? Well, as you move up, you've got more and more students scoring proficient or better on the math PSSA. Okay, so I can't tell you what the average score is. I can just tell you what proportion of the students scored proficient or advanced. That's all I've got for you. Okay? I also have left to right how many students are eligible for a free or reduced price lunch. This is our proxy for poverty. We call it economic disadvantage. Okay? So we've got the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged in that same school, right? Telling us how far to the left or the right. So no surprise, we see lots of points that are high and to the left, right? These are schools with relatively few economically disadvantaged students and high test scores, right? Lots of kids getting proficient and better. And as we move to the right, schools with a greater proportion of students who need those free or reduced price lunches, and we see that test scores on the average are going down. This is third grade. We can see that there are a fair number of schools, even fairly far to the right, that still have fairly high scores, right? Still have high proportions of students scoring proficient or better. Okay? We get this data for every grade, 3 through 8. Here is fourth grade, and again in 11th grade. Okay, and let me do that for you again. Can you see those yellow dots? Okay. Did it look to you like they went up? Good. Good. Fourth grade does a little better than third grade, all across the board. Okay, and really, I'm less interested in what happens across the board. If it's easier for the rich kids and it's easier for the poor kids, that's great. I love that. What I want to know is, when is there a difference? When is the difference more extreme, rich kids to poor kids? That's what matters to me. Okay, so this is all on page 21 of your report, and you can look at all that wonderful data all at once. It is eye-boggling in one page. But there it is. Here's 11th grade, and you can see that, first of all, the association is very strong, and it's steep, right? We've got, these points are all very nearly on a line, and that line goes down steeply. You'll notice that there's one point way over to the right and way up high. That is Roberto Clemente Charter School. Yeah, somebody give them a gold star. Yeah. Yep. So that does not change the overall pattern. That does not change the overall pattern. There's a strong increase. I guess I want to mention that. Oh boy, here. Area school districts that draw students from the suburbs in to take classes with the students from the urban center, and Allentown School District, which does not do the same with its suburbs. Okay. So, what do I want to do with this data? I want to try and make it manageable. I'm a math professor. I'll use a line. So I put a line up on my chart. It's a best fit line. So it does the best job catching the trend that all of this data from all over the valley represents. Okay? What I do when I create this line is I try and get it to pass as close as I can to all the points, and it has to pass closer to the big schools, right? I want the thousands of kids who are at Deer Ruff and William Allen to matter more than the dozens of kids who are at Roberto Clemente. I want to give each student in the Lehigh Valley equal weight as I create this line. Okay? And I'm going to do that not just for third grade, but here it goes again. Bang, 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 bang. We're going to go through all the grades. Okay? Different color for each grade. And I've given you the colors on the key there so you can follow. You can see that the red line for the third grade and the yellow line for the fourth grade, they're very close to each other. They stay close. They're nearly parallel, right? And the yellow line is a little higher. That's what you guys told me, that fourth grade did a little better than third grade. Okay? And you can move through and you can see that, what color is that line? That magenta or something, right? The 11th grade line, it's down much lower and it's quite steep. It's down much lower and it's quite steep. So I've got a measure of steepness here. It's the negative number that's in the key. It is the percentage of students who change from being proficient or better to less than proficient when you move from a school that is no try again. No economically disadvantaged students to a school with all economically disadvantaged students. So I'm saying if you did that for a third grade, you would lose 34.2% of your students. 34.2 would fall below that proficient threshold, right? And for 11th grade, you'll notice that it drops 63.7% of the school, nearly 2/3 of the students drop. So the fact that that drop is much steeper in 11th grade is telling me that economic inequality is making a much bigger difference in 11th grade than it is in third grade. Okay? And if you look at these numbers, and if you look carefully at the lines, you can see that there's a big drop between grade 6 and grade 7, and 7 and 8 stay low, and then another big drop getting to grade 11. Okay? So that's what's going on with math. I want to skip all the dots and stuff and go right to the lines for reading. Okay? If you look carefully, you can see that these lines are different. These lines are different. For one thing, even the red and the yellow lines are still pretty steep. They're steeper than they were. Okay? When we get down to 11th grade, we've got a line that seems higher, but it is still just as steep as it was. So what we're saying is students overall don't find reading as hard, but the differential between rich students and poor students is still steep. It's just as steep as it is for math, right? Even though reading is easier across the board. Okay? So let me compare those line slopes, because that's where the real interest is. You can see, I mentioned that negative 34% for grade 3 for math. It's negative 41% for reading. That's much larger. Reading is much more of a problem in third grade. We should be doing more to help address inequality in the schools in reading. That's what matters pre-K through third grade, and really right through elementary school. When you get to middle school, math is what matters. You can see that the inequality in reading actually gets a little better in third grade, right? It's better going from 6th to 7th and from 7th to 8th, whereas 6th to 7th and again in 8th, in reading, that's a disaster. Okay. So we can make a statement just looking at this rough data that there's a way to approach this that makes sense. Okay? So what am I saying? I'm saying that this negative association between poverty and mastery of these subjects, reading and math, it accumulates as students move through school. The problem is worse for reading in the early grades, and it's worse for math in the middle grades. And our Lehigh Valley schools are not lessening this differential in academic mastery that's there between our affluent kids and our economically challenged kids. So I want to introduce our next speaker. It gives me great pleasure as a member of the Lafayette faculty to introduce Karen Beck-Pooley, a member of the Lehigh faculty.
All right. I will try and follow that. I have fewer graphs, and they're not nearly as nice. What I was asked to do was to look into Allentown's new arena and the PPL Center and the larger neighborhood improvement zone in which it sits, and see what we might expect of both of these economic development tools. Both of those particular items, both the PPL Center and the NIS, are fairly new, if not brand new. The arena is barely 6 months old, and some of the earliest NIS-supported projects predate it by only about 2 months. So what those projects' long-term impacts are going to be is still pretty hard to tell. So how can we figure out what we might expect from both the PPL Center and the larger NIS? What might the arena and NIS mean for downtown Allentown? What might it mean for the larger economy of the city? And what might it mean for the nearby residential neighborhoods that make up sort of the core of Allentown? So to find out, since the arena and the NIS are fairly new, I did two things. First, I reviewed the literature on comparable projects, mostly other sports facilities that have been built nationwide. There's a lot of research and analysis out there, as we've added dozens and dozens of arenas and stadiums across the country since about the 1990s. And second, I looked at both census and assessors data from here in the Lehigh Valley to quantify the impact of a similar project that's local, the Sands Casino Resort Bethlehem, and all of the related development that's gone on around it on the Bethlehem Steel site. So before getting into what I found elsewhere, here's just sort of a rundown of what we're hoping to see from the PPL Center and all that NIS development. And as the project was in its planning and construction phases, there was a lot of talk in the press and in popular conversations about achieving these kinds of things. The hope was that it would bring visitors to the city in the thousands, if not millions, that it would create both construction short-term and long-term jobs for the economy, which is hugely important. And both the visitors and the new jobs are going to help stimulate the economy. It was seen as a way to catalyze additional downtown investment and additional development downtown also, and improve generally the quality of life for Allentown city residents. And it was also very much seen as this new era, this new beginning for the city of Allentown, chance to finally put Billy Joel aside and move on to the next step, which is no small thing, very important too. So based on the experience of other facilities, other cities, which of those things might we expect to see here in Allentown over the course of the long term? Are some of those expectations more likely to come to pass than others, or how can we ensure that all of them do? We're early on in this process, nothing is final. And so that was really what my review of the literature and also local data was meant to get at. What might we expect and how can we change that curve? So first, looking nationally, new sports facilities have not, on the whole, tended to do some of these kinds of things that other municipalities might have expected of them. On their own, researchers have found that new arenas and new stadiums tend to do little to boost area employment. They do not significantly add a lot of jobs. They don't increase a lot of jobs to those local economies on their own, just the sports facilities themselves. And they also do little to boost the wage levels in the municipalities of which they're a part. And that's largely due to the fact that most of the new positions, again, within these facilities are lower paying or service sector jobs. They also, again, on their own, don't generate much new consumer spending. Researchers have found that a lot of the spending that takes place in these facilities, again, specifically the facilities, was drawn from other entertainment venues in those municipalities. It wasn't created out of thin air. It's replacing money that had been spent at a movie theater or somewhere else. People had gone to seek recreation or entertainment. But on the flip side, arenas and stadiums have been much more successful at creating what researchers call non-monetary public benefits. And what they mean by that are some of the things that are up on this slide. They are successful at increasing civic pride. They improve a city's reputation and even its stature across the country. And these kinds of things are not insignificant at all. If you think about it, once a city has a better reputation, it then becomes far easier for that community to attract investment and attract visitors. So it's some important groundwork that these facilities can lay. So going back to things that are more mixed, the record for sports facilities, arenas and stadiums and things of that nature, their ability to impact residential areas is also fairly weak, and it's of all things the most mixed. While these venues do tend to stimulate investment in already strong areas, they're most unsuccessful at prompting investment in areas that are weak, in weaker neighborhoods. And the images up on the slide is of what is now Chase Field. It was originally Bank One Ballpark in Phoenix, and a study was done of the impact of that facility. The analysis found that the park did drive improvements and investments north of it into the northern, largely white, higher income neighborhoods in the North Central District. You can see them sort of to the top of the map that's on the right of the slide. But at the same time, the largely minority and poor Southern District near downtown Phoenix, just to the south of the map, experienced ongoing decline even after the facility was built. So fairly slanted effects when you're looking at what they mean for residential neighborhoods. So what does all this look like closer to home? Here's our local example. We got the Sands Casino, and it's on the Bethlehem Steel site along with a whole range of other entertainment, retail, arts-oriented investment. And this slide's just giving you an idea of why this proves to be a good sort of local comparable to the arena and the NIS. You can see at the bottom of the slide on the chart how these two projects and then their ancillary developments compare. They're both similar sizes, about 130 acres on the whole. They have similar mix of uses in them, whether it's hotels, conference center, gathering spaces, arts and entertainment venues of that kind. And they are both geared at their core towards tourists and visitors. If anything, the NIS gears more towards office in addition, but on the whole, makes a pretty good comparable. The other thing, too, if we're looking at impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods that are sort of immediately adjacent to both of these projects, those neighborhoods are fairly similarly situated. That's the graph on the top of the slide. The average sale prices, if you look at residential properties near both of those facilities, both tracked between 40 and 60% of their citywide average. So they both are about roughly half as valuable as their citywide average as a whole. And that's measured from 2000 to 2009. I stopped at 2009, that's when the casino came in. So just for comparison's sake, sort of pre these developments, these neighborhoods are similarly situated. So similar projects near similarly situated residential neighborhoods. And again, just to give you an idea of what neighborhoods it is that we're talking about, on the left, you've got Allentown. You can see from the citywide map sort of where it is that we're focusing in on. The darkest parcel is the arena. Sort of the empty spaces that surround the arena, it's not exact, but it's roughly where the rest of the downtown portion of the NIS is located. And then you've got the lighter pink parcels, which are the residential parcels that would have gone into that calculation on the previous slide. Those are the ones that average sale price roughly about half the citywide average. And then on the right, you've got Bethlehem. Again, you can see where within the city of Bethlehem the casino and Bethlehem steel site was located. It's on the south side. Casino's to the right of that dark green parcel. And then all of the lighter green parcels are the residential properties about 3/4 of a mile away from that casino that, again, were included on the calculations in the last slide. So what have we heard? What have we learned from the casino? Which, again, it's not incredibly old. It opened in 2009, but we at least have a couple years worth of information from it to see what it might mean for Bethlehem and the surrounding neighborhoods. On the one hand, it's appropriately been described as a boon to the rest of the Bethlehem Steel site. There's been a significant amount of investment, whether it's in the infrastructure or related development that's gone on across that site. And in many ways, you're seeing this already in downtown Allentown between the arena and the NIS, which is quickly filling up. So on the project site, there was a significant amount of investment. But at the same time, there was far less spillover across Daly Avenue into the residential neighborhood that's just, like I said, just on the bottom portion of that photo, just on the other side of Daly Avenue. And here's what we're talking about with that. Since the casino opened, the average sale price of residential properties in that neighborhood, so those residential properties about 3/4 of a mile away from the casino, have fallen in two ways, both in real terms, average sale price has declined, but it's also fallen relative to the citywide average. So if you look at the top graph, that green line shows the trend in the average sale price. Green line is the south side, those parcels near the casino. Blue is the city as a whole. And so when the casino opened in 2009, the average sale price is around $90,000 for those parcels. By 2013, it's down to about $60,000. The purple line at the bottom shows how it's faring, that average sale price relative to the citywide average. Again, 2009, when the casino opens, it's at about 56% of the citywide average. By 2013, it's down to about 43%. So down in real terms, and those properties have fallen in value relative to the city as a whole. Looking at larger economic impacts about what the new the casino meant for jobs, for neighborhood residents, and for the city of Bethlehem as a whole. As you move from before the casino opened to after it did, both the citywide, which isn't shown here, but also neighborhood level unemployment rates both ticked up. And then at the neighborhood level, the portion of residents who have some income from either salary or wages ticked down. And this isn't all necessarily the casino's fault by any means. We also happened to go through a fairly significant recession during this same portion of time. But it does seem to suggest that some of the findings that researchers have had in other communities where a lot of the economic benefits of sports facilities or entertainment venues like casinos tend to accrue to outsiders who commute into these facilities for jobs and not necessarily to neighborhood residents or city residents could be another factor playing out right here. And so based on all of this sort of national look and also the local comparable, it may be that as successful as the arena is at completing the NIS and NIS-related development is at transforming that portion of the downtown, there may be more of an issue seeing benefits from that, both the NIS and the arena, flow to areas outside that NIS, particularly to the weaker residential neighborhoods that are very close to it. And so given that, sort of the questions from this portion of the presentation to think on in the breakout groups is what would be our goals for those surrounding areas right outside of the NIS? And if the arena and NIS itself aren't capable of providing for those objectives, what other policies and programs might be put in place to do that? And then speaking of those breakout groups, I'm going to turn it over now to Christine Carpino, who's going to just sort of wrap up this portion of the program and also discuss those more fully. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. First, I'd like to thank all of our faculty presenters and all of the State of the Lehigh Valley authors for their interesting and thought-provoking research. into trends affecting our region. I'm hoping this information will serve as a nice springboard for the conversations that will take place in our breakout panels, which will begin about 10:15. I'd also like to thank all of our panelists who will be participating for their participation. The panelists that we have, as you'll see in your programs, represent a wide range of community partners, and each has volunteered his or her time to be here with us today to provide their unique perspectives and knowledgeable insight into key issues of interest. So thank you right now to our panelists. If we could all give them the rousing applause they deserve. And I'm listening to Hannah, who tells us we're going to push up the panels a little bit till 10 o'clock. So that gives you 15 less minutes to get all the coffee that you need. But I highly encourage you to do that. So 10 o'clock, the panel from pre-K to the workforce will actually take place in this room. This is the Commonwealth Herd Room. And we'll be talking about some issues of the workforce, economic development organizations, and the education to workforce pipeline, and what we can do to help our children succeed. The panel on partnerships in building community will take place next door in the Trexler Room. And there we'll be talking about creative ways to think about partnerships. How do we cross the aisles, so to speak? What types of leverages do we have in the Valley that we can use to form the best coalitions that we can? And then finally, the Health, Wellbeing, and Security panel will take place farther down the hall in the Wood Heritage Room. And that will be asking questions about broad conceptions of security. How do we think about health and well-being in a more holistic sense? So we'll be taking a small, short break for refreshments. Again, refill on coffee while you can. And we will be reconvening about 10 o'clock. I invite you all to stay and join in the broad discussions if you can. So thank you again for being here, to our authors and to our panelists. Thank you so much.